Welcome back, everybody. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 165. Today is Tuesday, January 7th, as we record live for the YouTube channel. If you're joining on the podcast, January 9th, welcome back. Enjoying the off season, and hopefully everybody enjoyed the holiday season as well. Van Burnett joined, as always, by Steve Gisueli. Got a great show tonight, looking at a kind of a part two from our last episode, looking at SP targets deeper in the drafts. Last show we did ADP 200 to 300. This time the doors are blown off. It's kind of everything beyond pick 300 in terms of pitchers that we find interesting, worth evaluating. You could call it targets, but I think that's what we're setting out to do on this episode, Steve, is kind of see where we land with some of these guys. But certainly the topic itself is always an important one, because this is where you can find gold. And I know for your approach this year, as you've kind of mentioned before, you're actually looking for a little bit more tried and true veterans around pick 200, where in the past it's usually where you're going for the dart throw, high upside guys. You're going to go for a little bit more stability there. So that makes this zone extra interesting for you in terms of catching lightning in a bottle. Cannot wait to get into these names. We got about a dozen. But Steve, it's been a couple weeks. We had the holidays in between. I told you I was on daddy daycare. The whole fathering thing has been a new off-season schedule for me, and it pushed back my home league banquet. And I found that my shotgun start that usually happens on the calendar year was not quite the same this year, I think, because I was doing the daddy daycare thing. So I have yet to do an industry draft, but I'm kind of chomping at the bit. And I feel like this is almost like a final prep show. So I think between now and next week's show, or next episode in a couple of weeks, I plan to get one under my belt. But how we doing out there, man? How's life?
Yeah, it's good. This is your first off season as a dad, right? Yeah,
It is. You got to adjust.
Yeah, that's we all have to adapt in our ways. But yeah, this is exciting. I thought last show was a lot of fun. And this show for me even more is super fun. This is my favorite part of draft prep. This is my favorite topic to tackle. This is my favorite area, and I get the most joy out of drafting a late round starting pitcher that hits, right? Like there's no, I think we mentioned it on the last show, there's no feeling like that, like drafting the pitcher with your last pick in your home league, that like everyone like is like, how is that possible? Like, I remember this is what, probably 10 years back now, maybe a little less, 8 years, when like Jose Fernandez was like a major prospect, and there wasn't like known that he was going to break camp even through the end of the season. This was even like in the early stages of Twitter, like, so there wasn't like this, with Jared Jones last year as an example, everyone knew, like, he wasn't a sleeper by the end of the year, or if
Wide
he was,
awake.
he was being targeted by everyone. Even as short as 10 years ago or so, there was much less noise about guys like that. And I just remember one of my good friends who drafted Jose Fernandez, was literally would never say his name all winter, like had him as a target. And like, then when he goes on to have that amazing rookie year, like there's no feeling like that. So, that is, I'm not saying that we could find guys like this, but that's sort of the process, and getting value out of this tier is what's super exciting, and why I always like doing these deep SP target shows.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at this area of the draft, we call upon the godfather, Nick Pollock. He'd be like, stop that, don't say that. Yeah. The truth of it, though, is you need to have an approach with drafting some of these guys that, like, will you know right away, and some of these are big question marks in terms of like, will they have a spot in the rotation, which is a big deal, but we'll have to kind of hold all things equal and just assume these guys have slots. And then from there, this part of the draft is the area where it's kind of like you're not tied to them other than like a draft and hold. It's like, give me 2 starts maybe, and then I better know quickly, which I think is we got a few guys that, whether it's youth or trying to catch veteran production for a couple of the names we'll talk about. At least when I looked at this list, Steve, there's a couple of the youngsters that might be like the classic hipster headache-inducing starting pitcher that stifles the entire roster. That, like, if they were to get a rotation spot and they struggle out of the gate, you might have a hard time cutting bait. There's other ones where it's like, oh, if it doesn't look good, I would move on with no qualms. So that's another interesting like aspect about pitchers this late.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes where there's disconnect and comparing this to like preseason rankings, like there's so much to go into rankings and rankings for the first few weeks of the season, rankings for rest of season, your standard 12 team drafts, compared to draft and holds. Like, yes, a big reason why these guys have such late ADPs is because there's question marks, whether it be around health, role, or just consistency, that you kind of have to, at least when how I look at this with an optimistic point of view. Like I always see the upside in guys, probably to a fault. Like, what can this guy do? And I probably get more hyped on guys than I should. But I think if you approach with that sort of outlook, like that's what's going to lead you to discovering hidden gems and drafting a pitcher post pick 400 that has, a potentially a league winning impact. You don't want to bet the entire house on this and not draft any starting pitchers whatsoever and just bank on these guys, because you're not going to get very far doing that. But the starters come from this area every year that are useful. It happens every single year. We could go on. We could literally just do a show going through the years of naming guys that have, top 10 round value post pick 300 for starting pitchers. It happens all the time. So, it's something to just that I just sort of need to differentiate between sort of my strategy in taking early starting pitchers and then here, which is basically just looking for upside.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think there's, we'll get into the names here because a couple of them have a different, it's more like value upside versus like what you're describing as shooting stars that could end up being SP1, SP2 type of territory. But I think, a lot of that depends on your draft, of course. So it's roster dependent. It's like how you've built your staff, all that stuff. But the first one, and we'll go in kind of order of ADP. The first set we have here runs pretty much from ADP 350 to 400, at least as we record this. But Kumar Rocker is at ADP 348. And this is not a new name for those who were paying close attention last year, just because of the pedigree and simply the stuff that he brings. And you're looking at a guy that's got not only a 96 mile per hour fastball, but 7-foot extension, which again is that cutoff that Nick talked about when we were on the show, that 6'9" extension like that's good. But once you get to great at 7 foot is when that makes a huge impact. And we've seen that extension play up fastball effectiveness when they throw 93 miles per hour. Rocker's throwing 96 with that extension. So right away, you're just looking at like a dominant 6'5" young pitcher who is just throwing gas. And then you add in the fact that he's got a slider to go with it. That's pretty nasty as well. Like, this guy has insane stuff. The question is, I think it's fair to ask, like, is he just going to walk into a normal starting pitcher role? And then beyond that, I think there's still some questions about, we only saw 15 innings from him last year. So are we going to see a consistent product, or is this one that runs the risk of like, he has a rough April and you're hanging on to him, and does it ever turn a corner? But he is certainly an exciting one. And I think absolutely this late in the ADP of a 348, the price is right. So talk to me about Kumar Rocker, Steve. I know this is a name you've been in on since it first came about, kind of midsummer last year.
If we do this show in 6 weeks, I don't think he would have been eligible for this exercise. I think there's just going to be a ton of healing around him. Yes, the innings are an absolute concern. It was just 36 minor league innings last year, and then 11.2 at the majors. Shout out to Fangraphs. They added an MILB total row,
I saw
which
that,
is amazing because like you're always struggling to do math, especially like on air, to add up the innings total. And now you can just see it like, because it's broken out by in 2024, he pitched at 3 levels: complex ball, AA, AAA. And now there's just a nice sum of them in its own additional row. So you can see that he had a outstanding 39.6% strikeout rate and just a 3.6% walk rate. I remember his starts vividly. The 3 starts that he made in the majors, because it came during my home league playoffs, and I was streaming him for I think at least 2 of those.
That's
and
right.
yeah, like he passed the eye test. Like, in his brief minor league stops across the last 2 years, the 28 innings in 2023 and the 36 this year, the lowest swinging strike rate that he had was 17.4%. Like that's just insane. Like, we oogle and ogle over like, anything over like
14, 13, 14.
Yeah. It's just he never had one lower than the 17.4% in the 28 innings in 2023. Not saying that that's going to carry over, but it was 13% in the 11 innings or 12 innings in the majors last year. Yeah, I think I'm pretty excited about him. I think there needs to be, some assurances with his command, maybe a better feel for that changeup. But like you saw in those starts, like guys just looked absolutely ridiculous versus slider. Like you said, the extension with that good velo. And then what I think is most exciting for me is like he's, now the full year off Tommy John after he was drafted, right? And there was that whole drafted by the Mets didn't sign him, went to the independent ball, right? Like I think he was pitching for like the Long Island Ducks, got drafted again, finally got healthy. He's now 25 years old. The Rangers, are seemingly going all in again. Like they added Jock Peterson, right? Their lineup looks really good, especially if Seager can stay healthy. And they have a healthy Jacob deGrom going into this year. Like there's not many more of those left. Like the Rangers are going to be all in, and I think that's a reason why they would, start with Rocker in the rotation. Like there's no reason not to, in my mind, if that's how the Rangers are approaching this year. And I think they should. And I think that, their indications from their offseason moves, that's how they're going to.
Yeah, Steamer's got him projected for 141 innings, and
that's pretty good. Yeah,
exactly, it is, and they're pretty conservative with the 9 strikeouts per 9 innings, because it's always been easily double digits. Curious on the command concerns, because other than the 3 short starts that he had in the majors, it's always looked really manageable. And just like looking at what he's done in the minors and the brief stint in the majors, another thing that's really nice about him is a high ground ball rate as well. Like when you've got the high ground ball rate, the strikeouts, like it's kind of everything that you want. And then if command, there's so many guys that it's like, oh yeah, they struck out the world in the minors, but they also had like a 10% walk rate. He didn't have that all throughout, his, and I guess to your point, we still have seen, under 60 innings altogether from him in the minors, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a history of volume. Yeah, that it is concerning.
But the minor history is 2 walks per 9, which is not too bad.
Yeah. I would push back on that, in that it's, 1, a small sample, and then 2, major leaguers, at least from watching those few starts, were able to lay off some of the pitches that probably the minor leaguers couldn't. With those guys were looking for 96 and getting the slider, and they're swinging that stuff 3 feet outside the zone. That doesn't happen as often. It's going to happen because his stuff is that nasty, but it's not going to happen as often that I think, led to those sort of suppressed walk rates. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Like there wasn't any, it's not like we get excited about guys, and we're going to get excited about guys on this very
episode.
show
Yeah.
with pretty bad
11.
minor league walk rates. Like
Right.
Rocker didn't have that.
Yeah.
And not to spend too much time on him because I know we got a lot of names, but he's currently not penciled in the rotation on roster resource for the Rangers. It's Eovaldi, Jacob deGrom, John Gray, Tyler Mahle, and Cody Bradford.
So Steve, before we move off him though, because it's a great name for this show, for this topic. If the helium happens, what kind of zone? I mean, do you look at like kind of what the names we were throwing out last episode, but like Spencer Arrigetti's in the low 200s. Then you've got like around 240. You've got Gavin Williams, Jeffrey Springs, Walker Buehler, Drew Rasmussen, all in that territory. Like, does that feel like a tier that he will move up in? And if he does, are you still going to be interested at that investment?
Yeah, because that means that he's got a rotation spot, right? Like, I think it's going to be very black and white with Rocker. Like, he's either going to be in the rotation and, looking good in spring and, signs point to Rocker starting 4th game of season, whatever it is. And then he'll probably be up, maybe even beyond Arrigetti, honestly.
So if he gets a rotation spot, how about his teammate Eovaldi at 205, who we talked about and that you like?
Yeah, I think it would be build dependent. And again, that's kind of like
the theme.
Oh yeah, like the smart move is going Eovaldi, which he's not a picture of health, right? But there's a more projectable role and history of recent major league innings, right? Whereas if I had a rookie or two earlier, an injury prone or two pitcher, or someone that's more injury prone than the other than others early on, I would lean towards the safer Eovaldi. If not, I'm gladly taking an upside shot on Rocker if he's named to rotation, which I think that he might be. Like, Tyler Mahle, John Gray, Eovaldi, and even deGrom aren't pictures of health. And I even know Cody Bradford missed some time last year too. So there's definitely going to be some opportunities for him there.
Okay. Well, let's move on to another name that was kind of all over our starter sit list at the end of last season, DJ Hers, who for the Nationals, 24-year-old, had a kind of a flashy August, if I recall. I'll pull up the splits, but I think that there was a blow up against the Mets. Yeah, so I think it was in September. He gave up 7 in one game against the Mets. But in August, he had about 30 innings of a 3.10 ERA, a 1.17 WHIP, and 35 strikeouts over 29 innings. That little run, at least for me, kind of put him on my radar as like, oh, is this a name that I need to care about the rest of the season for, like, shallower leagues? And do I care going into the off season? He's an interesting one, Steve, because the swing and miss stuff is good. He had a 27.7% K rate over 90 innings last year, but he is one that comes with glaring walk issues of the 9.4% walk rate. Not as much velo as Rocker, not as much extension, but still good extension and a good fastball. When you look at like what he does with the fastball change, that's a lot of the weaponry with him. I think the slider, when you look at compared to league average, the swing and miss rate is down so much on the slider that you kind of wonder if that takes a step forward. Like a lot of, fastball floor pitchers work on their slider and improving it all off season. I think there could be a really dangerous pitcher here. It just comes with the big wart of the command and a longer track record of wobbly command. But yeah, I mean, a really good second half last year. And that's reflected in him being kind of second on this list of names at ADP of 390. And yeah, all through the minors, last note, because he was with the Cubs all through the minors, dominant K per nine. I mean, it was 13, 14. I think there was one stint with like 15 K per nine. So what do we think of DJ Hers? Is this kind of a booby trap where it could backfire just because all the stuff we usually get excited about he has, but the back of the baseball card might not look as good? Or do you think this is the name you're going to chase?
No, I like DJ Hers. I feel like we had this conversation a ton in season last year. It's like, yeah, like this 10 strikeout start was great, but look at those walk rates. He walked 4 the next start. Like, maybe it's going to come back and he's going to, have just a ratio killing week with 10 walks and 2 starts or something like that. And it never really happened. Like, yes, there was
just the one blow up game.
Yeah. There were some super impressive minor league stints. Like basically you had a K rate above 30%, like at every single stop. But he also had, a 21% walk rate in 32 AA innings, right? In 2022, he had, 14% walk rates basically throughout all of last year at 2 different levels in 94 innings. So yeah, there's a ton of walk command control issues with him, but it seemed much better at the major league level. Like if he walks under 10% of guys, he's going to be a very good fantasy starter, which he was this year. I know that the ERA is sort of unsightly at the 4.16, but a 3.29 xERA, a 3.77 SIERA, and yeah, that 28% strikeout rate and just 9.4% walk rate, like that'll do. That'll play. Even with over a homer per nine innings, like it's still doable as long as you don't walk. Like that home run rate comes into gets magnified and becomes a bigger issue when you are walking over 4 per 9. He's at 3.65, and who knows, maybe there's some improvement there if that's what the Nationals did at the major league level in 88 innings, maybe over the offseason, adding some swing and miss to his slider would be the next step that he could take to be a potential really good return. Like Hers has the stuff to be like a Justin Steele in my mind. Like this is like a Justin Steele starter package, I think. Maybe not the command that Steele has, and I don't think Steele is the greatest at limiting walks even. But that's sort of what I envision when I think about the upside for DJ Hers here. I had him a ton last year. I like him a lot.
Yeah, and I mean a valid comment from Uncle Ted in the chat as well, that if you're playing like a DC 50 or main event where it's like deep teams and you manage the rosters, if he's going up against a righty heavy lineup, you just kind of skip.
Yeah, you sit him out that week. Yep.
And that's a good one. But yeah, that's a good call on Justin Steele. And what all clicked for Justin Steele was when he developed the slider. After the four seam was solid. So yeah, the lefty combo there, our comp there, both 6'2". I like that comp, Steve. So I think Hers is one that I will be chasing as well, because if you remember in August when we were texting, Steve, I had a decision to make, and I went against Steele for Dean Kramer, and it ended my playoff run. So I'll be back in there. Well, let's shift over to kind of a spicy name that also will have some helium if a role is there, and that's Bubba Chandler with the Pirates. I think this is one that it's like a heralded prospect, but I know Nick has brought some I don't know if skepticism might be a strong word, but just a little bit of like approach with caution.
Cold water,
a little bit of cold water, that this isn't just like Paul Skeens reincarnate here. This is a guy who might have to evolve his secondaries. But that said, he's got a high 90s fastball, pretty deep pitch mix. And yeah, I mean, when you look at their roster resource, Johan Oviedo is there, and he's just kind of just a guy. And the Pirates, man, all of a sudden you look at Jared Jones and Skeens, and it's like, why wouldn't they just look at this as a total window to truly compete for the first time in a long time? And Bubba Chandler as being one of the top pitching prospects in the game. I know a lot of people are excited, and in the ADP of 404, you kind of don't. There is zero risk at this other than playing time at the moment. But yeah, exciting prospect. I don't think I've really made up my mind on this because I feel like this is one that's very much on the like spring training watch list. One of those guys that could move up 100 picks depending on how the spring goes, if not more. But talk to me about Chandler and where your excitement level is here.
Yeah, I'm maybe not as hesitant as Nick. That's probably how I stand on most things, and Nick, takes things with much more leveled approach, right? And yeah, and just has the calmness and the the thought to not get overexcited. But that being said, I think there's a lot to like about here, that Bubba Chandler here. I hate to do the Jared Jones comps, but like what makes him really good is his, high velocity fastball with a ton of ride from a lower arm slot. Like that's what, Jared Jones basically is built off of. He is Thomas Nesco's friend of the program at TJ Stats, number 3 pitching prospect behind Jackson Jobe and Andrew Painter, names that I don't think that we have on this list, but could very well be and should be mentioned in the same breath. But yeah, he has that amazing fastball. Start to rely on the changeup more often. Has those elite strikeout rates and has gotten the command under control in the last 2 years in the minors. This year it was a 31% strikeout rate and just an 8.6% walk rate, so much more palatable in terms of the base on balls. Has a good strike percentage. That's something else that Jared Jones that does, that he just pounds the zone and guys can't hit that fastball and then are put away with the slider, right? Like that's the sort of thing that I think allowed Jones to break out. Like there was a question about his command, but then he just started pounding the zone with that fastball that was unhittable, and it didn't really matter because he could just throw strikes, and the guys couldn't hit it. So there is some, it seems like there's a type here with the Pirates pitchers, and I hope that they just let them go. Like,
yeah, it's like
even
crazy
just from out of spring, like just. I don't know what like the Pirates. It seemed like I know the Pirates were good when like the McCutcheon era, and like had some really good teams, and that wasn't too long ago. But it seems like the Pirates have been rebuilding for like 50 years.
Oh yeah, I mean those teams were like wild card at best.
Yeah,
because that was like when the Cardinals were actually good. You remember during that era too, there was such a stigma about how the Pirates just could never develop pitching. Like when, oh gosh,
like
who
Musgrove
was like Chris Archer
yeah.
came from the Rays, and it was like fastball only, all that stuff. And now you look at Skeens, Jones, and the prospect of Chandler, and you're like, yeah, the Pirates. And I actually don't even know if I'm sure they cleaned house on their staff coach from then to now, but
yeah,
like they've gotten some pretty good stuff out of like.
But I mean,
Mitch
it was
Keller,
it was like Garrett Cole, Jameson Talion, and Joe Musgrove, and it was just like, all right, just wait till these good prospects are off the Pirates, then they'll be good.
Right.
And I know
exactly.
that's,
and kind of
Cole went to the Astros, and
right,
and there was a varying degrees of success with
Musgrove
at first,
Padres,
and then Talion as well, but. So it's probably a bit of hyperbole, but yeah, there was a case when there was a time not too in the too distant past that was the case, and now it seems like they figured out. They definitely at least have some interesting prospects, and I think Bubba Chandler should be good and hopefully is good soon for them.
Yeah, and yeah, Thomas Harrington, another one mentioned in the chat by Uncle Ted, is another name that could break through, because you look at their SP4-5 and it's still Bailey, Falter, and Oviedo. So it's like
those are spots that are begging to be taken by
exactly, it's
exciting
in their
prospects.
hands, and they've got they
Like,
got
like
Brian
the
Reynolds,
Pirates would
they got
be
O'Neal Cruz,
whether they're good or like whether they're actually like a playoff team or not. If their rotation was like Skeens, Keller, Jones, Chandler, Harrington, like they would be much watched. They would be a must-watch team. I'd be
all the
watching
time.
them every day.
It'd be like the Rays. Yeah, it'd be
Yeah.
like the Rays, where, it's kind of a motley crew offense, but there's still some good bats in there. So, yeah, really exciting. And I mean, the Central is, and NL Central is there to be taken as well, which is another factor. So I think all signs point to them, unless they're an organization that just doesn't care about winning,
which they might be.
which they might be, then this is the window to push when you look at that division. So, so those are some young names there: Kumar Rocker, DJ Hers, Bubba Chandler. We're going to talk about some veterans here that probably offer a little bit more of value this late in the draft, as opposed to kind of that lightning in a bottle. But we're going to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. Okay, so Steve had to revive one Nick Martinez at 409. And I know when you're coming off those names, this is like talk about cold water, just in terms of the, the sizzle factor, because Nick Martinez seems like has just been around for years and been around excitement circles where it's kind of build you up to let you down, whether it's a long relief role, turn starter. Well, I think a lot of people might be sleeping on how good he was in the 16 starts last year, along with the bulk relief for the Reds, a 3.10 ERA and a 103 WHIP. And this was another friend of the show, Lance Brozdowski. Man, that was a fun episode having him on. We'll have to see if he's got some time this season. That was a blast. Same with TJ Nestico. But Lance did a write-up on Nick Martinez talking about how he was throwing the changeup a lot more to righties at the end of the season, and it was dominant. Like, if you lost track of September stats, just as everybody's kind of switching gears, he gave up only 3 runs in 32 2/3 innings, and during that time had 30 strikeouts, sub 0.7 WHIP. So Nick Martinez was elite, and that's where there was a lot of excitement this offseason from other clubs, but the Reds did make a qualifying offer, and he did go with the Reds on like a $18 million deal. So not obviously a great landing spot,
I think
but
it was the qualifying offer, and I think he accepted it.
He did. Was double checking on that, because it would be sweet if he landed with a better ballpark and everything. But I think, having said that, the NL Central is a soft division. Obviously the ballpark sucks, but at least he's with a coaching staff that did get the most out of him at the end of last year. And yeah, he's kind of, I think he's still looking for a multi-year deal. So I think there's a bet on himself type of thing. And I'm kind of curious what, let's pull up in real time what he's projected at in terms of volume. I know so far we've only got Steamer, which isn't always the best. Pitching projections are tough in general, but they've got him at 162 innings. So that's where you're getting the bulk from him. And yeah, I think there's enough here to where if you've got a ton of volatility between pick 200 and 300 for SPs, this could be a sneaky one in those deeper leagues. And again, it's one that I'm going to have no issues cutting a Nick Martinez if the first 1, maybe 2 starts go bad. But wanted to include the name here because, man, what a great end to the season. And it looked like, with that filthy changeup being thrown more often to righties, he was starting to kind of unlock some potential we've been waiting on for years.
This is a bit of a loaded question, but what would you guess that the worst ERA Nick Martinez has had over the last 3 years? And he's pitched 142, 110, and 106 innings from 2024 to 2022 over the last 3 years. What is the worst one? Yes. What's his worst ERA of those 3 years?
Just playing the question straight up, I would have guessed like a 4.35.
3.47.
That's
That's
nuts
the
to me.
worst.
That is nuts to me. I just don't know if that's because he's kind of a headache in and out of
Yeah, I mean,
rotations and stuff, but
there's only been 35 starts.
still, what you're getting is especially
Or
with
sorry, there's been there's been 35 starts, but um yeah, he's been good. He's been good.
he's been
There's
good.
yeah.
And like it's kind of one where like I mean the contract itself kind of underlines the fact that, you know, he's not like a scrub. And I know you're pointing out the stats as well, but
And it's just surface stats. It's the CRA, so I know we could
so
roll our eyes, but
here's the next. So I guess he did throw 142 last year. So
he did.
like
He made 16 starts last year. Yeah.
if we get 162, and because then you look at the ERA projections for the 162 and they're at 459. But to your point, we have not seen that in 3 years. So I think there could be a little bit of like just the old man squad here
Yeah.
where he's 34 years old, a little bit of ageism. And I think that you can stand to gain quite a bit from a guy like this.
Yeah, I agree. That changeup is really, really nasty. And I think Nick Martinez is like a really insightful dude. Like I'm pretty sure he has some awesome interviews out there and stuff, and talks about, you know, the craft of pitching and everything like that. And
Yeah, I
understands.
think
Yeah,
Nick
Nick's
Pollock
talked to him for
talked. Nick.
sure. Yeah. A guy that I'm rooting for, and I'm interested as well.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. I like it. Well, let's shift over because we got more names to another veteran here in Frankie Montas, who, you know, was with Cincy and was struggling, and he's kind of turned into a journeyman a little bit, where it was like, okay, New York didn't go well, then Cincy didn't go well, and all of a sudden he goes to Milwaukee to end the season, and the results completely ramped up. And now he lands with the Mets that have done a nice job with pitching, especially as of late. Think about a Sean Manaea as kind of a renaissance or a revival project. And there was a nice Twitter thread out there at Isaac Groffman where he kind of broke down the changes from Cincy to Milwaukee. And they raised his arm angle 7 degrees on his fastball. It jumped up a tick in velo, and it also added a little bit of vertical break. The slider also jumped up a tick, and the swinging strike rate jumped up quite a bit. And overall, his strikeout rate took a big step forward. We know Montas has been around for a while. He's another one that you would hope, if the Mets are, you know, they're not going to handle him with kid gloves by any means. He could go for as much as he's healthy for. I mean, I think 150 is probably like the floor in terms of usage, unless
He had that last year. Yeah, he had it last year.
So I think, yeah, when you look at Montas with the ADP of 450, and of course this is getting real deep, but he's circled on my watch list, Steve. And I wanted to throw it out and see what you thought about Montas here.
I am very excited about Montas. That it was not on my bingo card
Right.
as recently as like August of this year. But another guy that was great down the stretch. I did stream a bunch in my fantasy playoffs across a few leagues. He was really good in September for the Brewers. And I know that that's a dangerous game to play. We talk about it all the time, small samples, second half splits. But you know, the Brewers are a smart organization with pitching. They saw something, they took advantage of it and tweaked his repertoire, and he was really good. The
11
Mets,
starts with the Brewers, just because we were talking about it. 11 starts with the Brewers, 57 innings, 70 strikeouts.
Yeah. That's like prime Frankie Montas, like Oakland A's 2021 Frankie Montas, right? With the 27% strikeout rate and just a 7.3% walk rate.
Exactly. And honestly, some of his like the ratios are inflated, which are probably keeping the attention down. And maybe the Mets we're looking at that, but he got pretty unlucky. If you look at like
he gave up a few homers.
the fly ball.
Dude, I remember there was one where I think a reliever came in, like, or you know, the Brewers were fighting for a spot. They left him in, and like he gave up 2 homers in like the 7th inning or something like that. Like there's little intricacies, like we talked about this in the beginning of the season. Like when you're in season, you study all of these like little moments, and it's like, you know, oh man, they left him in for 2 innings long, and you know, but in offseason research, that's a half a run on his ERA, right? That
Yes,
it's like, oh yeah,
exactly, dude.
all these little moments have context that are important that sort of is washed away in the off season. But that's just a quick little anecdote on Montas. But another thing, like the Mets, not only with Manaea, but they did really well with Severino. Something that stands out to me is that Frankie Montas has 4 fastballs and a 4-seamer, a sinker, or 3 fastballs, a 4-seamer, a sinker, and a cutter, all of which he throws at least 19% of the time. And basically, Saris on Rates and Barrels was talking about how, yeah, that's the Mets thing. Like they all their pitchers in the minors learned 3 fastballs. In the playoffs, they were the team that threw the most number of different fastballs. Like, out of all their starters, they threw 3 fastballs the most. It's a nice way to get by bad fastballs in that, it's none of these are great, but hey, you don't know if it's a
The
4-seam with a little
sinker,
ride,
yeah.
a sinker with a little fade run, or a cutter with a little run, or a sinker with a little fade.
That's
So
interesting.
that's sort of their approach, and that it looks like they identified Montas as this perfect fit, and then he has that split finger and slider that are good whiff pitches. So it's exciting, and I think that maybe there's potential for Montas to get back to that,
For sure.
maybe not 2021 prime Montas where it looked like he was like, basically an ace for 187 innings, but I think he could be probably a decent SP2, SP3. Not unsimilar to like what Manaea was on the whole for the year last year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, you kind of look at the journeyman and the late bloomer. Still, this will be his age 32 season, which is not, ancient for a pitcher. And you mentioned the split finger. You got to go way back to like the archives when we were super excited about Montas, but that's the pitch that he had introduced and broke out. And if you look at year over year, this past season, it had the highest swing and miss since 2021.
Yeah. So it
So,
looked like it was back. Yeah.
there are reasons to be excited. And that's what we saw near the end of the last year with some of those tweaks. He had a couple 10 strikeout games. Granted, one was Rockies, but 10 Ks against the Phillies. Like, I think there's reasons here, especially if you take into account the possible volume with the Mets, that he could be one that, we're looking at the SP ranks near the end of the season. And it's like, wait, Montas is up at like SP 36. Like, yeah. And you're getting him way later than that. So I think, Montas is another one that's pretty interesting. Wanted to shift talking about the Brewers to Tobias Myers, which was another name brought up on last episode in the chat. Tobias Myers is one that also had a really solid back of the baseball card last year in 2024 for the Brewers. The difference, nothing really looks enticing under the hood in terms of the stuff, in terms of the swing and miss. Now the control is much better at a 6% walk rate. But last year across, it looked like 25 starts, we saw a 3 ERA and a 117 whip from a rookie, didn't get rookie of the year votes. And the K per 9 was under a strikeout per inning. But you kind of have to stop and ask, like, is there something for Tobias Myers that's, kind of tricking the traditional, sliders and stuff metrics that we usually get excited about? Calling on Lance Brozdowski again. He did an interesting little write-up that was talking about how he actually went middle of the zone quite a bit and basically just played his 4-seamer and cutter off of each other, and basically like reduced quality of contact against it to where it's like, okay, do you need the strikeouts, or is it he's deceptive enough that he can get away with 25 starts and still be like a 3 ERA guy? Now that'll probably have some regression naturally, but at ADP 427, it's kind of crazy when you look at the ratios he put up and in a way the volume, and ignore this guy. So I think we got to at least assess and see what your thoughts are on Tobias Myers.
Yeah, someone that I just completely missed out on. Like, I didn't add him anywhere.
Me
I
neither.
didn't. Yeah, just someone that was like, up, this was a miss for me. And maybe it's a victim of, being this involved in, the stuff and looking for velo and searching for whiffs. There's other ways to do it. And Tobias Myers might be doing it. Like, he has elite IVB, like, it's like 20 inches of IVB of ride on his fastball. Like some of the best in the majors. It's like 95th percentile as far as his IVB. Decent extension, but doesn't have that velocity, doesn't have that slider. His changeup is really good when it's on. A lot of times it struggles getting strikes, and he does only use it 11% of the time. But it's like a filthy pitch. Like it's one of those things where like when it's on and he throws it, it's like, yeah, this was the nastiest pitch of the day, like pitching ninja type of stuff. And doesn't, like, you look at his Fangraphs page, or just his back of the baseball card stats, like he's been in this is his fifth organization: Baltimore, Tampa, Chicago, White Sox, Cleveland, San Fran, and then finally Milwaukee. Been around in the minors since 2016.
Wow.
So yeah, he's only 26. That's crazy. So when was he? He's been in the minors for 9 years prior to that. So great story. And it looks like he's glad that he finally made it. I think that this might be one where, like, a lot of people are going to gloss over. But it's a good organization that does well with their pitching. They're smart with their pitchers. Like, if he could add a little bit to that slider, throw some, get some more consistency with that changeup. And despite the lack of velocity on the fastball, like maybe it could be like a Bailey Ober type of thing. I know Ober has the extension.
Yeah.
That Myers doesn't really have, but there's other ways to get there. So I think it's definitely an interesting name, and 427 seems pretty late, so I think that's a good dart to take.
Yeah. So that much, I was just looking at the break that he has. Yeah, like you were saying, it's just interesting. Like when you go to his stuff, it's actually the only pitch that has a stuff plus over 100 is the changeup at 109.
Yeah.
But yeah, look,
which
like
that pitch is. It's ridiculous. It is filthy. Like it does have a 109 stuff plus in my mind, like, and changeups are hard with that model. I know that has updated that to correct that. I don't know if that's flown over through to Fangraphs yet. So even if that was the old one, it's a bit understated. And yeah, like the velocity on the fastball isn't there, so that does lead to below average stuff plus there. But it does have that ride, like we talked about. So.
Yeah.
I don't know. And he did throw. He did get up to 95 in some starts, and that playoff start he did versus the Mets looked really good. I know he was pulled early, I think, in that start, maybe potentially because he was, going all out. But who knows? Like, this could be a thing. Like, Myers is now throwing 95 in spring. Myers now has a slider that's getting whiff in springs. Like, that's the sort of stuff. Like, that's the stuff that you need to sort of happen in tandem with keeping an eye on these guys sort of now.
Yeah, and I was trying to go over, because it's just like with that much success with the and I guess that goes back to the Brozdowski article, but I was trying to look at like his location for the four-seamer, because it was effective and the slider was effective. It just didn't have the strikeouts. But it's just weird, like he does not follow the Blake Snell blueprint at all in terms of high fastballs, low breaking stuff.
Yeah. And he has the
he goes super high with the
IVB
changeup, high with the slider, and then the four-seamer is like basically middle of the plate, which is just crazy that I mean that it's been as effective as it has. Like for a fastball that lacks velocity, he still had like a 436 slug and 240 batting average. Like, that's serviceable. So okay, so I think Tobias Myers, at least at this cost, we're interested to. It's not like, we've yet to see it not succeed, I think, is what's important. Is he is just 26, and the first full season we saw really good results, just different kind of results. So that's Myers. let's jump back over to David Festa. That is another one like DJ Hurst, Steve, that we were talking about a ton in the second half of last season. Thomas Nestico came on in April and was like, just wait, this guy won't come up this year, but next year, if he does, he's incredible. And Festa came up, and despite having video game numbers in the minors, kind of like Andrew Abbott did, it was similar in that the strikeouts took a little bit of a step back, but still impressed, I think.
Yeah, there was a lot to like.
There was a lot to like. Exactly. Yeah. And I actually, TJ had put out on Twitter a nice little graphic of the best changeups in baseball based on zone whiff and O swing. And David Festa was number 6 there with names like Carlos Rodon, Ober, Tarek Skubal, Cole Reagan. So a good list to be a part of. And yeah, Festa, I think, is a name no one would be shocked if he was more of the ilk of Kumar Rocker, Bubba Chandler, DJ Hurst in terms of kind of a meteoric rise that he could take this season. But he's also not in the rotation, at least on like roster resource. Like they've got, and then you got Zebby Matthews also outside of the rotation. So I think there's some playing time questions, but Festa's a great name. You've got 2 teams, Steve. Is Festa on either one of those? Because I feel like he's a WAF guy.
He is on my draft and hold team.
Okay.
I do not know if I do not know my other team is a gladiator, so not many slots. So may not be, but if he is, that would be he is. So I have 100% exposure. There you go. I have David Festa on my NFBC 50s team and on my gladiator. And gladiators, you only get 9 pitching slots for that. So he's one of my 9 pitchers. So I guess that's all the analysis you need for me. He was my second to last pitcher taken before
big fan
Sugano. And that was before Sugano signed with Baltimore. So hopefully
they both get a consistent run in those rotations and everything.
Yeah. But yeah. So I'm hoping that's the case. I don't know. I see. I would have him in over Simeon Wood Richardson and Chris Paddock. I think he's him and as well and Zebby Matthews as well are 2 of their best 5 starters as it currently stands. And I know there's some questions going on with like the Twins ownership right now. I don't think they've spent any money really this offseason yet. I don't know if they've even signed a major league contract. Like the transaction updates I've seen, they signed Mike Ford to a minor league deal and like Huascar Inoa to a minor league contract back in December. So they haven't really done anything this offseason. That being like, I could see them moving a pitcher or something else once this ownership situation gets sorted out there in Minnesota. I would, if I were a betting man, I would think that their rotation includes Festa for the most part of the year, as well as Matthews, if not to start the season, like basically, as soon as they can. Like they were like I know Festa and Matthews, like they kind of, as they were chasing the playoffs last year, like they were relying on those guys. Like they basically had like 4 inning limits each start, but they were making their standard turns. They were relying on them. They needed them in big starts. Like I think, they're not super young anymore, either of them. Festa they're both 24. They're going to be 25, honestly, this year. So I don't see any reason for them to sort of hold.
Yeah, it's time. And they are kind of log jammed because, Simeon Woods Richardson, Paddock, Pablo Ober, Joe Ryan.
Maybe one of them gets traded. Maybe that's they could definitely a valuable trade piece to have a controllable, interesting starting pitchers in both Festa and Matthews. But I like Festa a lot ever since TJ turned us on to him. There's a lot to like you said.
All right, I dig it. So that group was a couple of veterans and Nick Martinez, Frankie Montas, and then Tobias Myers and Festa, who could be taken. Myers could keep it up, and Festa could kind of emerge if given the opportunity and everything clicks. We've got a handful of other pitchers we'll have to move through a little bit quicker, running long, but tis the season for shows like this. But we're going to take our second ad break, and we'll be right back after this. Steve, this one can be a little bit shorter because I don't even know how deep to get into the analysis of Bobby Miller at ADP 451.
Can it be? Now it's just getting interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like laughing, the Dodgers have like 10 starting pitchers.
Yes.
So what is Bobby Miller's? We thought his draft helium would be like rising, and actually with the Dodgers loading up, what do you make of Miller? Like, is this now a don't draft just because of opportunity? I thought it'd be a good bounce back, but I don't know what to do with it.
Twitter is now a cesspool, and like you don't know anything that's real, and there's just all these million accounts like that just tweet out stuff that don't have any basis, and they tweet them like they're facts, and there's no any way to check that they're real or not. And like there were reports that, and I don't even want to say it because it's not true, but like people are saying that Roki Sasaki is like signed with the Dodgers, which he hasn't yet. He hasn't made a decision. It's not going to happen until the next international signing period opens up on the 15th. But like they could, the Dodgers definitely could sign Roki Sasaki, which would be even more detrimental against Bobby Miller's chances at making this rotation. But I don't know. I think it was maybe a few episodes I went on a tangent about him. Like, I think Miller was hurt last year. I think it was that simple. Like, he looked amazing that first start, looked amazing the next inning in his next start, and then his shoulder got hurt, and he was never the same. And the Dodgers had a million pitching injuries last year, and didn't, and needed him, and who knows if that meant he rushed back. He never looked right basically after that. And there was really no signs whatsoever that he was figuring it out. But at that point, it's like, all right, now it's the off season. You can reset and totally work on everything. And like, I'm still excited about Bobby Miller as a prospect, despite the dumpster fire that was his 56 innings this year in the majors and 33 innings in the minors. Which weren't good either. Like there wasn't anything encouraging.
Can't you just? Either, I can already picture the like late April notification that Bobby Miller is like the next starting, and just a rush to the wire. But I feel like it's a log jam, so maybe it's the draft. It would have to be a deep team, but it does seem like, I don't know. There's always the like Tony Gonsolin of old, where it's like, that they're good when they get the opportunity. I mean, other than kind of the implosion this year, that he seems like he'll be more of a fab buster when he gets an opportunity, at least crystal balling that a little bit. But I don't know. Again, with some other names here, I don't want to spend too much time because, like you said, you already broke down your view on Miller. And as much as I was kind of out last year, I mean, how often do you see
flyer this year?
How often do you see a guy go from SP, top 20 SP on expert rankings to go all the way down to the 500s? So
a guy that we were drooling over as a prospect had an impressive rookie year that looked like there was foundation to build upon. All the signs pointed to a breakout, and then it went as wrong as it could, as quickly as it could. Like that's how quickly it can go for these starting pitching prospects that are can't miss. That's why Tinsnap is a real thing, but I still have hope for Bobby Miller, and think that there's still something there that's worth being interested in.
Okay, well, let's jump to a guy who definitely has a role in Jose Soriano with the Angels. I mean, interesting pitcher. Again, not a strikeout specialist by any stretch. Fantastic ground ball pitcher. And he's like like you mentioned, Steve, the eye test for Soriano is impressive. I mean, he throws extremely hard at like 98 miles per hour. And has the ground ball rate. And yet what we saw last year wasn't insane in terms of the stats. So a 3.42 ERA is nice. The 120 whip is not helping you. And then well under a strikeout per inning. The this was one you threw on the rundown. I think it's an interesting name, extra interesting in the fact that you're getting him as late as you can at 492. Talk to me about Soriano here.
Yeah, he's interesting. A guy that I had a lot of early in the season last year. Rode him through his really good first half, faded a little bit in the end. Did have an injury concern, and didn't make the last few starts of the season, but MRIs came back all clean, which is great. And like they were, normal off season, all that, which is good because I think there's a lot to build upon in his 113 major league innings this year. Like you said, the fastball, it's a really hard sinker that leads to a really good ground ball rate. There's a changeup that is again a knuckle curveball that's like one of the prettiest looking, pitching ninja-ist. We need a term for that, like when you have a pitch that always ends up on pitching ninja. I don't know, maybe there is one that's just slipping my mind. Like it's one of the nastiest, prettiest pitches in baseball to watch. And like, it's like, this dude throws super hard, has that amazing breaking pitch. Like it should be better than the 20.7% strikeout rate that he had. And it was backed up by still pretty good, but the 10% swinging strike rate isn't what you want from like a top end starting pitcher, or even like a guy that's going to stay in your rotation all year. That's more like streaming territory. But I think there's a bit to unlock here, and there's an interesting pitcher somewhere here in Soriano, and maybe there's another. This is another guy that's sort of like the Bubba Chandler or the Tobias Myers, that if there's something else that comes out of spring, out of the pitch, then you become even more interested. Like there's a great foundation here is sort of what my overall point is on Soriano, and a foundation to be interested in, especially if pick 492. I also did draft him I believe in my draft and hold too, a little bit early, I think around pick 400, so a little bit of a reach there. But I also think that like he's a rare combination of someone that has interesting stuff, has upside.
Oh yeah,
but like dude, he's gonna be in the Angels rotation, like their rotation, right? He's their number 2 starter behind Kikuchi right now. Like he's pitching for the Angels this year, and gonna pitch a lot if he's healthy.
Yeah. I think he's another one we should look at his projections if you want to pull that up. The point I was going to make is it's not very often
projected
anymore.
For 148 innings.
Okay, you take
23% strikeout rate and a 3.89 ERA.
So the thing about Soriano is he has the swing and miss stuff on the knuckle curve and the slider. So it's like conventional wisdom, unless the 4-seamer is just like a sacrificial lamb to make the sinker as good as the sinker is, because the sinker had a 214 batting average against the 4-seamer, which he throws more than 3 times more than the slider that has good whiff rates. It gets crushed like a 622 slug. So it's like, if you were the pitching coach, why wouldn't you just say, let's dial back on the 4-seamer and bump up the use of your slider, and things will look better across the board? But maybe it's not that simple.
I mean, sometimes it is like when that stuff changes, it's like, look at this. This is the pitch mix change. He's looking good.
Throw your good pitches more.
Yeah. We buy into it. Like, so there's it's more complicated than that. Maybe he's not that comfortable with the slider. Maybe the 4-seam is something that he needs to rely on in certain counts and whatever. So there definitely is some more intricacies.
But it's encouraging.
But like it's there. Like it's like, all right, like we have something to work with. You have the tools, to work with, which is exciting.
Yep. Okay, so speaking of tools, Steve, you added Sean Burke on here with pretty impressive. I mean, he's the mold, right? It's like 6'6", 7-foot extension, throws 95 with the fastball. And the White Sox, I mean, they just kind of turned Garrett Crochet into a top 5 pitcher in the league. Is Sean Burke next? Are we excited about this? I know that's like the bar is extremely high there, but I think there's exciting stuff here for a guy that we saw just 20 innings of, but even from what we saw, it looked really good.
Yeah. This might have been like the name that I was most excited to talk about on the rundown. It's someone that I wish I drafted in my draft and hold. It's I'm shocked that I'm this excited about a White Sox pitcher that's going at pick 573, but a 33% strikeout rate and 71 minor league innings last year. It carried over in 3 starts to the 29% strikeout rate. The walk rates are concerning and definitely needs to have that improve. There was double-digit walk rates basically at every stop of the minors. But it's a really good fastball, hard with good ride, and a nasty slider. Again, it's that Jared Jones build, and if he's able to throw strikes, there should be a good amount of upside here. So I'm pretty excited about Sean Burke and hope that he's. I could see him getting a lot of spring training helium, where he has those akin to like Louis Seal and Jared Jones, where it's like, all right, this guy looks good. All right, this guy's going to be in the rotation. All right, he's now everyone's wide awake sleeper in the back end of the White Sox rotation.
Yeah, I mean, it's salivating in terms of all of like the sexiest pitching stats. You're right that when you look at across the entire 3 full seasons in the minors, actually 4, the walk rate has always been close to disastrous, but maybe that's just he's been just trying to strike out the yard. So it's like
and there's always the caveat with minor league walk rates too. It's like, all right, like you hear stories of guys having to throw 80 changeups out of the 85 pitches that they need to throw, right, to work on a pitch. Like it's like they don't care about necessarily winning the game or not walking a guy. So you do have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But it still lower walk rates would be more encouraging for sure.
You're right, and I know it's super small, but in the 3 starts we saw from him, it was a 9% walk rate, which is not good, but it's you've stomached that with other pitchers in the past.
And
think about
it's
Dylan
sort of
Dylan Cease
or the Blake Snell thing, where it's like, all right, you're walking guys, but you're striking out a third of the guys because it doesn't matter that you walk them because you're just going to strike out the next batter.
Yeah, no, it's a really good name and an exciting, just like prototype pitcher, 25 years old, 6'6", and what we saw in those
he's the sort of name that you could bust out in your home league, and then you could your TJ will be angrily tweeting you about it then.
Yes, indeed. Well, I made it this far, just suppressing my Cardinals depression, but Quinn Matthews at 581 is one that is exciting, and there's not a ton. Tink Hence was the name that for a while I've been excited about, but Quinn Matthews pitched across like 4 different minor league levels last year, so he's a great one for the new Fangraphs row of all of the MILB. But it totaled out to 200 strikeouts and like 143 innings. He's got 4 solid pitches, if not like 3 great ones. The fastball velo is most interesting, though, where last year it actually jumped from where it was at of 91, 92 and not that exciting up to 93 and touching 96 last year. Derek Gould reported he's going to be at spring training as like a non-rostered invitee. And I mean, the Cardinals, they might, we'll see. The Arenado stuff is like dominating all the drama, but the NL Central is pretty weak and their staff is weak. It's kind of, there's a lot of just like Eric Fetty, will he get moved is a question. What the Cardinals do in terms of like, are they selling? Then it would open up a slot for him. If not, you still have like Andre Palante, Steven Matz, that guys that just don't seem like they're slated to be full 160 inning guys. And I think Quinn Matthews not only would be the first one to join the fold, but he's also he might just force his way in because he's been that good. And it looks like there were like tangible improvements to get there. So I don't know if it's like a break camp type of name, but it is one that I think is like a sprint to the waiver wire and splash on some fab when we do actually get to see Quinn Matthews.
Yeah, he'll definitely be like one of the most hype pitching prospects to come up like after the initial rush if he doesn't make it out of spring training. Yeah, I think I saw a tweet. I forget who it was by, but like if you just looked at all pitchers across all levels of professional baseball, he was like in the top 5 for K minus PB at his 26.8% strikeout minus walk rate. And that comes with the 35.4% K rate. Like, there's some guys get to that 26% K minus PB with like a 28 strikeout rate and like a 2% walk rate, or I don't know. Or they get to good K minus BB is not that good, but like a 20% K minus BB with like a 21% strikeout rate and a 1% or 2% walk rate, like, which is good. Definitely a good pitcher, but you're not getting those counting stats of those Ks if it's just a 20% strikeout rate. Whereas Matthews is getting it by striking out 35% of the guys like he did in his 143 minor league innings last year. So, another, like, I know you like the game log type of things. Like there's a ton of 10 strikeout games, 12 strikeout games, 11 strikeout games. Like he struck out, like just looking at it real quick.
I think there's a 13.
There's a 13. He struck out double digit guys. This is great radio. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in his 26 starts. So, basically a fourth of the time, every 4 times he started, he struck out double digit guys, which, doesn't count the games that he got to 9 and 8 a bunch of times too, as well. So there's some swing and miss stuff. It's exciting.
He is a name, and yeah, lefty, 6'5" extension, the fastball, changeup, slider. Like it will be exciting when he's on the mound, and just please don't let it be. Insert any Cardinals pitching prospect of late that has just kind of built us up to let us down. So if we got to get excited about, and I know that came from the Rays, but Matthew Liberatore, man, I mean this has to be better than those ones. So
yeah, it's gonna be.
Yeah. So yeah, he's a top 10 pitching prospect for sure. So Steve, round us out with Noah Schultz, who again, you're kind of dabbling in the White Sox pool here. I don't know if you're trying to just will it into existence that we got another Crochet, but this guy's more like a Bailey Ober in terms of a 6'9", but that fantastic slider.
Bailey Ober with high 90s velo or mid 90s velo. That's kind of
that's enticing, right? with a fantastic slider. But talk to me about Schultz and what you're seeing here.
Shout out Uncle Ted in the chat. He basically spammed his name all last episode that we had to talk about him this episode. He's going at pick 633. That's because there's probably even less of a at least right now as we talk. He only got up to AA last year, but hey, I mean, they kind of did it with Crochet. I know it's a bit different because he was always hurt. But yeah, amazing stuff. Another, elite strikeout rates and really good walk rates. Like he doesn't walk anybody. That's what's also amazing. It was a 6.7% walk rate in 88 minor league innings last year. The swing strike rate backs it up. Great CSW.
He's like a superhuman.
Yeah,
what's the underbelly?
Uncle Ted's comping him to Randy Johnson in the chat there. That's a little bit too that's some lofty expectations, but it looks pretty good.
The 6'9" lefty throwing.
All he's got to do is hit a bird in spring training, and then we're good.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and get really upset about it. Yeah, this is great. I just wonder, what are the odds we actually see him?
I know year? There's so much that goes into it with what the White Sox want to do, right? Like
exactly
with Crochet, it was like okay, they like he was good. He made the rotation. It's like, all right, they're trading him. Like, it was decided that they were trading him by like essentially once he made those good starts and was established that he was good. Like that was the next part of the plan. Like I think they want Noah Schultz to be part of the next good White Sox team, which may mean a little bit more slow cooking, and we don't need to get this guy up to make his 15 first half starts to trade him like he's 21 years old. Like
Right.
they
Whereas
they
Sean
probably
Burke's
view him
25,
as
yeah.
they view Schultz as the future long-term ace of the Chicago White Sox, right?
No, yeah,
So
I
that may
agree.
play things differently in terms of how long they want team control of them, blah blah blah, all that stuff.
Yeah, but a great name nonetheless, and one to not forget because it's a good shout, Uncle Ted. I mean, this is it's like a creative player in MLB.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
it's just
Like this. You just throw all the sliders up. You make him as tall and lanky. Make him a lefty. Like
yeah. What do you want, man?
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah.
It's the Randy Johnson comp. I love it. All right. Well, there it is, Steve. Fun show, man. Now I feel fully primed to do a deep draft. So I got to go get on that. But in the meantime, great being back on the show with you. For all of our listeners, every other week still, we'll be switching over in the not too distant future to once a week. And can't wait for it, Steve. I mean, before we know it here, it's going to be pitchers and catchers.
We'll have what? One more January show, right? We'll have one more January show, and then we're in February, which is essentially draft season.
Cannot wait. And thanks everybody. If you guys have tuned in and you're with us here in the cold times of January, go out, give us a rating and review. It goes a long way. We don't have a ton of them, despite the 5 years. I think it's just like it feels like it takes a long time. It doesn't. Give us a little review. We appreciate it. But we also appreciate you guys listening and hope the off season is going fast for you. Hope the drafts are ramping up. And we'll be back in a couple weeks. Till then, thanks for talking baseball with us.
Thanks for listening, guys.